Fantastic. I'm going to press the button. Yep, that's fine. I'm going to press the button to record on YouTube. When it lets me. Ah. Okay. With all hopes that's working now. And I think we're good to start letting people in. You good? Hello, everybody. As you are joining us, we've found some good new friends, some old friends. Welcome to the launch of Birth of a Mural. Can I please ask you to stay on mute? It's fine for you to have your cameras on, but please stay on mute the entirety of this webinar. You're going to have a wonderful opportunity to hear Hiba share her poetry, share her thinking. We're going to have some really great questions. You can put questions in the chat box, but please, 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 for the entirety, please stay on mute because this is being recorded and it's also being shared on YouTube. And we're so excited to have you. We're so excited for this opportunity to share this absolutely brilliant book. We hope all of you already have it in your hands, but if you haven't, please check the chat box because there are links to Hiba's website, all the Amazon links to her YouTube, all the Amazon links for her book. It's a brilliant opportunity today and we're very, very happy to have you. So, quick introducing of myself. My name is Genevieve Ray. You probably know me from the poetry circles, but if you don't, I am a poetry reviewer and I've just opened my new site, Ray Lit Reviews. I am also a spoken word artist and poet from Bedfordshire, and I have the great honour of working today and being able to host Hiba Heba and the release of her brand new book. So I'm just going to do a few rules for everyone. So as I just mentioned, please make sure to remain muted. This is being recorded, it's being shared on YouTube, so we want to avoid as much disruption as possible. You are welcome to have your cameras on, but please keep all the actions to the minimum. We need this to make sure everyone gets the best opportunity to hear everything that Hiba is going to be saying and all her beautiful poetry. You can post comments in the chat box. In the chat box, I will be regularly putting Hiba's social media handles and all the information about how you can get hold of the book. The event is being live streamed on YouTube and being recorded right now. Towards the end, there'll be a chance to post full questions and Hiba will be answering some of those. Listen very carefully to the poems today because we actually have a quiz and the opportunity to get a copy of this, especially if you live in Pakistan, getting a physical copy. If you live outside of Pakistan, you'll be looking at an e-copy. This is a great opportunity to get this wonderful book. So listen very carefully to what's said about the poems and listen very carefully to the poems because this could be a great opportunity. And we're really, really happy to have you. And I'd like to now introduce you to the lady of the hour, Hiba Heba. Hiba, are you with me?
Yes, I'm right here.
Thank you so much for being here. I hope you're super excited. Would you be happy for me to do your introduction?
Yes, definitely.
So this is Hiba Heba, Hiba Aamer. She is from Pakistan. She's a Pakistan poet with a BS in English literature and linguistics from Air University in Islamabad. She was the first runner-up at the New Feathers Awards 2022, and her poems have been appeared in the Adelphi Review, Punch Magazine, Ofi Press, Fragmented Voices, the Eunoia Review, Poetry Wales, and elsewhere. Hiba also has poetry micro-chapbook called Grief is a Firefly, published by Origami Poems Project in 2021. Birth of a Mural is her debut full-length poetry collection, published in 2023 by US-based Golden Dragonfly Press. Hiba is an English lit instructor at FAST News's Islamabad campus and is on most Saturdays. She co-hosts verse murals with me on Instagram Live, a virtual poetry open mic for emerging and established poets. Lebanese poet Zena Hazem Beck, author of Oh and Louder Than Hearts, has praised Hiba's book, saying, with lush language, Hiba's poems navigate the macro and the micro, the ordinary and the extraordinary. This compelling collection condenses time, intertwines with boredom and sorrow and defies definitions, gender norms, and receives ideas about faith. Additionally, Sacha Aurora Akhter, the UK's based poet and author of Love Like Blood, and among other books, has called Hiba a luminous poet after reading Birth of a Muriel. So, one of the first things we would really like to do is introduce you to a friend of ours, Daniel Schultz, because Daniel has done a really beautiful little video talking about the importance of Hiba's work and would really like to show you and share it with you. So I'm going to share screen now for us all to hear, and I hope you enjoy the beautiful words that Daniel has to say. Right, hopefully everyone can hear this clearly.
The sun is shining, of course. The birds are sailing the blue tides of the winds, of course. Submerged into the vast ocean of the tame sky. Of course, because today is the book launch for Birth of a Mural, which I would like to honor in spirit by rendering a few thoughts in prose. Whenever I read one of your poems, I see the silhouette of a person, the outline of a scenery, almost as if encountering a mystery scene. You originally wanted to become a crime novelist, but the facts are that crimes are not really mysteries. So you became a poet. Because in the world that we live in, no one ever asks the reason for a crime. The reality we see every day seems self-evident, yet unspoken. Or maybe because what we see lacks words, seems unreachable, an image that can never become quite clear, akin to a dream. I would describe it with a passage from Helene Sousou's book 3 Steps on the Ladder of Writing, where she says, "It is the feeling of the secret we become acquainted with when we dream. That is what makes us both enjoy and at the same time fear dreaming. When you are possessed by a dream, when you are the inhabitant of a dream, you are driven by a kind of heart beating. And the dream says something that is never said, that will never be said by anyone else, and which you unknown. You possess the unknown secret. It is this, not the possibility of knowing the secret, that makes you both dream and write. The beating presence of it, its feeling." Stumbling over this passage as I was researching my PhD thesis, I could not help but wonder if dream is the other side of reality, that it is out of the cynicism and nihilism of reality that the idealism of the dream rises, that while reality shakes us up, our dreams are able to shake up reality, because that is what your poems do. When they build up a sense of wonder and detail, you unroll a tapestry that is the world to us. Introduce us to its circuits before pulling the rug from beneath our feet, keeping us in suspense, like a magician of sorts. The magic you are practicing being your verse. I wish you well, dear friend, because the way you write verse truly is a dream. Happy book launch.
A beautiful statement from Daniel, and I want to open up to our wonderful author, and even while staying very muted, please raise your hands in a massive applause to our authoress and discuss with Daniel's video. So what I wanted to ask Hiba really is, with Daniel's comments, how did you link with his thoughts on how your work truly moves him on receiving that video the first time.
Okay, can we wait 2 minutes because there's azan going on in the background?
Oh yes, absolutely fine.
And then you would have to repeat your question because I couldn't hear you clearly. So like just
No problem.
All
No problem at all. Okay. So to reiterate my question, on first receiving Daniel's feedback and review, I was particularly drawn to how he said your work moves him through the rhythm and the quality and the elegance of it. What draws you to write with the rhythmic writing that you do?
I can't hear you clearly. There's some,
Oh.
Let me get my earphones. Wait.
No problem at all.
Can you hear me, Jen?
I can hear you just fine. Can the audience hear both of us? Even if a small thumbs up, that's really helpful to know.
Now, could you please repeat the question?
No problem at all. So what really drew me about Daniel's feedback is how, thank you for the thumbs up, everyone, how there was a real elegance to your writing through its rhythms. What inspires you to write with the rhythm that you do when you're writing?
So basically you want me to say what inspired me to write poetry the way I write poetry.
Yes.
And I would say that I think Daniel was right when he said that, I wanted to be a crime novelist in the beginning, but maybe I was, so curious about mystery, or I fell in love with mystery so much that I became a poet, because I think that is, what poetry demands: mystery in the beginning, curiosity, and questioning yourself and your surroundings. And then naturally, because I was more inclined towards not just what is being said in the novels or in the poetry texts that I read, but also the fact that how it is being said. Poetry is a lot about sound of the sound of the language than it is about, say, the meaning, or, even the words in itself. It's the sound that different words create, the musicality within it. So I was always more into that part of the language, and I think that's what inspired me to become a poet. When I started writing in my mid-teens, it came out as what I call musings or different snippets, but they were very musical. Or if you have read the imagists like Ezra Pound and, people like that. So very minimalist images, and they can't be considered prose, so they have to be poetry in some way. Yeah.
Fantastic answer, thank you. And we've just had a couple of people join us. Thank you so much for joining us. You'll notice that you've automatically been put onto mute. We ask you to stay on mute through the entirety of this webinar so that we can focus on our wonderful writer, and to make sure we're not interrupting any other of the listeners. So please stay on mute. You're welcome to put small comments and responses in the chat box, and please check the chat box because there are links to all of Hiba's social media handles. So thank you again, audience, for showing up, and thank you to Alice for publishing this absolutely fantastic work. And I would now like to invite Hiba to tell us about the titular poem. What inspired Bertha Muriel?
Okay, all right. So this is the book. If you people haven't seen it yet, it's called Birth of a Mural. Of course, the image is inward. All right. So the secret is that the title of the titular poem itself is not very much related to the title of the book. In some way, it is, I mean, it carries forward the same message. So let's talk about the title first, and then we will talk about the cover art. Now, if you people know what murals are, you would know that murals are these wall paintings, right? And we see them in many cities. In our Pakistani culture, you would see so many murals painted randomly on different walls. They could be, you know, a political or social commentary on something, like slogans or something like that. They could be just there for the, you know, for the purpose of visual appeal, aesthetics. And then there's another thing that's like, you know, of course, they hold cultural significance for everyone, and they're written in your own native language sometimes. So murals tend to convey some sort of message. And the process of making a mural, you know, wall paintings is the process in itself is that, you know, something ordinary becomes extraordinary once you attach importance to it, once you attach importance to the wall. But the thing about murals is, as the time passes, and like I remember that when I, you know, go to work every day, I may come across different murals on the walls. It's very common in our countries that I live, Karachi, Islamabad, Rawalpindi, all sorts of murals are there, but they go unnoticed. They remain unnoticed, right? That is one thing about murals, that something that is always somehow you think always exists, so it just loses its meaning with time. But then there are also, maybe there are some days when you're stuck in the traffic and you're just looking around and you catch a sight of a mural, and then that spurs some sort of curiosity, right? All of a sudden you become curious again. What do these murals mean? Who made these murals? Because you never know who drew those painted those walls, and who are the people, who are the artists, what was their, you know, what were they trying to convey? So all of that spurs a certain curiosity again. And somewhere between these meanings is lie the themes of, you know, of the book, Birth of a Mural. That was my aim to, you know, both, as Zena Hashim Beck said, the Lebanese poet, that the book also talks about ordinary and also talks about the extraordinary. But Mehwish Amin, who is the editor of the Aleph Review, she said that, you know, if I read it here, which I think she wrote it very well, she said that these are some beautiful new similes and metaphors that make you look at the most quotidian of acts and objects with a fresh new eye. So something very ordinary that you may overlook in your, you know, in your everyday routine, that comes to prominence is what I want to do with the themes of this book. And the cover art is more or less, it complements the theme. So this is basically a sculpture made by the artist Billy Bond. And this displays the art, the Japanese art of kintsugi. All right. So kintsugi is an art that aligns with their philosophy of wabi-sabi, if you've come across it. And kintsugi is where they try to fix broken ceramics, right? So whatever old objects, ancient objects, ceramics, normal objects that are broken, they try to fix it with gold powder. And that is sort of a symbol of maybe to you know, tell the people that when something gets old or rusty, you don't necessarily have to discard it. You can make it new by, or you can sort of call its brokenness its strength. So this is what I try to do in this poem, and I'm really happy that Sasha Akhtar called it a luminous book, because this is what this book aims to do. No matter what you do, and however you are, you have so many different dimensions to you. You are deeply flawed, but at the end of the day, that's who everyone is, and that's what makes us all luminous. So now, if you want me to go ahead and read the poem itself.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So the poem is also called Birth of a Mural, but this one has something to do with, again, when you create art, wait a minute, right? So it's a whole process, almost like giving birth. The creation of art is almost like giving birth. It's not just the child who is being born, but the mother is being born with the child as well. So in this poem, you will explore themes of motherhood, but also the fact that the mother is now two people in one body. She has become a mother, but her past version, who she was before being a mother, is still there, and maybe it's her shadow self now, because the other one is coming to prominence. So yes, again, the speaker in this poem is going through, you will see some postpartum depression, sort of themes of postpartum depression here. And then, so just keep in mind, when you think of your mothers, how much do you know about them before they got married, before they were your mothers? So this poem just tends to tell that. So here we go, Birth of a Mural. Repetition. A mother rocks her baby in a carry cot, her breath fixated on a markhor's head on the wall, her breath reinventing the dim life of monotony. There are some unexplored adages in the floral notebooks of her mind. Resistance is to end repetition. Motherhood rises like dust and falls like an untold history. Midday, it pirouettes around the question of what to cook. Is there any organ left in the fridge to be boiled for dinner? To the onlookers, she is a shoal of goldfish and the ripple. There is a steep gorge nearby. A stream revels in its tirelessness. The rocks beneath bathing with ultramarine blue spirits. The mother picks up a book and teaches her baby the colors of a rainbow. Vib Gyor. Her child is now old enough to fill each new void with his mother's face. This thing has a voice. This thing loves me with a specific sound. So I'm just a mirror away from discovering the specter in her eyes. Her touch, the quietness of Flora. This thing often burns the witch lodging inside her, that inward scream like the shadow of Medusa. There are moments in a day she calls it quits and dallies to the stream, decanting the onyx ashes of the witch, milking that wild, sibilant urge to be someone else entirely. When she breathes through her lungs, she's breathing through another body. She's fragmenting into a mural, into herself. So towards the end of the poem, you will see that I also referred to, in some ways, in a very hidden way, I refer to, if you people know the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan. So his theory, middle stage theory, between the relationship that starts developing between the mother and the child.
Capture it so absolutely beautifully. And already, if you see the wonderful comments coming through, thank you everyone for such lovely, encouraging comments. They are already asking for more poems. So I'm going to ask if you would like to introduce us to 2 more poems, please.
Okay, 2 more. So the next poem that I'm going to read is called Things I'm in Love with This Moment. And this poem does not need any explanation. It is what it is. I wrote it last year. So yes, you can keep in mind that this is about things I was in love with in that moment when I wrote it. All right. Things I'm in love with this moment. Imagination. A drill in the wall, musical and rambunctious, like dewy gardenias in his eyes, waning, then blooming. I'm in love with the treacherous idea of freeness. My hair flapping like a country's forsaken flag outside a car's broken window. So what if I live inside a bottle? The bottle is not my home, it's all substance and plastic. I imagine all that is made of substance and plastic. I am in Scotland, the wind is a chorus, beauty tells self-effacing lies when pronounced beautiful. All I know is lagoons were never beautiful, their image is. Stillness is in this multi-dimensionality. I'm in love with Taylor Swift's All Too Well. Yesterday, I fell in love with Parmesan chicken, something I never ordered, but the waiter forgot, and then it was all I wanted. Was he God? I came home and fell in love with the fleetingness of Taylor's affair. Her song has never returned to old blows inscribed in its multilingual aches. My brother gifted me a sunset lamp in hopes the changing hues offer a poetic ambience. He said, "This is for the Ahmed." Now this poem's inception has become endless. I'm in love with how my heart bursts into tears when Daisy hears her name in my voice, drowning in those cul-de-sacs around the streetlights. The love I feel is a feeling of recalcitrance. I'm in love with my panic-stricken singing, an alias that appears out of the eucatastrophes I forge in my gut, wearing buttoned-up plaid shirt, wrapped up in an ajrak. All that looks sacred isn't always sacred. I'm in love with my 7-year-old self who wept on the chip-flaked staircase, begging to be noticed, begging to be carried downstairs in firm arms, a pharaoh's body pulled from the ruffles of the seabed. So there are two words that I used here. One is Ahmed, and in Urdu, Ahmed means the revelation of a poem. It's the concept in Urdu poetry where, you know, when the poem is revealed to you, you just have to sit down and write it. Otherwise, you know, it won't come back again. And Ajrak is a unique Sindhi shore. And you must have heard a name, Daisy, there, who was my cat, and recently we lost her. I used to take care of her, and she could recognize her name very well. So if I used to call her from my balcony, she would, you know, if she was in the corner of a street somewhere, she would come back. So, you know, like I said, that's why I decided to name the poem Things I'm in Love With This Moment, because that moment would never be the same again. All right, now there's a third poem. You said 2 poems. So before we move on, I'm going to read The Vicissitudes of Self now. And you must have heard Daniel's video, and he read a small poem. He was saying the sun is shining, of course, and then he used of course as a refrain. So he was imitating this format, this particular style of the poem, in which I have used of course as a satirical sort of refrain. And this poem basically explores the complex and rather contradictory nature of self. That's why it's called The Vicissitudes of Self. And you must be aware, the literary people here, you must be aware of the concept of pathetic fallacy, right? Pathetic fallacy, especially Shakespeare is famous for that, is when you try to express, when the writer tries to express his or her character's emotions through the surrounding environment, especially nature. But what happened was that during COVID, we were not able to get out of our homes. And our surrounding environment was not really nature, it was dead objects. We were locked in homes and we were surrounded by dead objects, right? Bookshelves, bed, mirrors, so many different things, teacups and whatnot. So this poem tries to, the speaker in this poem tries to express herself or tries to physicalize her emotions through these dead objects. The vicissitudes of self. Coffee is cold, of course. Bedspread is ceaselessly rebelling against the mattress. Mirror is scarred with lipstick and foundation speckled with loose powder, of course. Phone is forgetting the loops of this index finger. Body is unfurling inside a barbed wire. A punching bag is putrefying beside the bookshelf. Everlast is etched on its stiff exterior, of course. Body is made of the dust on a coffin. Junk food wrappers, cardboard cutouts, cola cans, phosphenes in the dark, of course. Body is a charred mackerel squirming under the saran wrap. Dreams are dingy. Most of the litter is bred from food, of course. Click the lighter, light up the moon-kissed candle. There are ways to reclaim the tactility of a touch. The same coffee cup, when microwaved, becomes a Mjolnir in the dome of the palm, of course. Body is a fortress of mist reviving a dead rivulet. Body is that gentle glimmer wafting around the burnt midnight oil, like a believer returning from an umbra. So in a way, this poem can be considered a nice self-grounding exercise too, you know.
I would say that really comes out of it. It really does. And I want to lean on one beautiful comment in the comment section, actually, which says physicalizing of one's emotions. Wow. Which is something you are absolutely expert at. You give all items in your world, especially in the book, so much emotion, so much drawing. They vibrate with passion. And I'm intrigued to know, with your list of loved things from your first piece there, it's always in flux, I imagine, but do you find you are finding more and more beautiful things to love as time is going on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's always the sun. I love sun, but these days because we have summers and it's not sun, it's actually we are inside the sun. So that's not something that I'm liking, but I like the smallest of things too, you know, and I do find I do try to find happiness in the small joys, like, you know, if you come home and you're feeling really tired and exhausted and it starts raining, that's good. And there's another cat who prances about in our home, and I've called her Kiara because, you know, for our love for Lion King as you know, when we were kids. So Kiara is, you know, I've started liking her. So yeah. Now these are the things that I'm in love with in this moment.
They're beautiful things to be in love with, and that beauty keeps resonating in every time you read. And I want to also share that in the comments, how much people are loving listening to you read. You're all going to get a lot more of that. So we're going to move into some questions here. So what first inspired you to put a collection together? Yeah, what drew you to do it?
So as I told you that when I started writing, it came out as poetry. And obviously back then, because English is not our native language, and when we start reading poets, we often start with the classical poets. Even if we're not, I mean, I have studied English literature and linguistics in detail. So we have studied from Homer all the way to the postmodern poets. But you usually start reading the romantics, right? Wordsworth, Blake, Shelley, P.B. Shelley, and the famous one, why am I forgetting his name? I should not forget his name. Keats, John Keats. So, so all of them, right? And what I did was I started imitating them. But then what helped me was when I started sending my poems out to different magazines, and I started becoming aware of the contemporary conventions that are being followed. And I started reading more of contemporary poets, you know, Zana Hashim, Tashani Doshi, Ocean Wong, Maggie Smith, all of these, Ada Limon. So all of these poets, I liked that, you know, there are still poets who are being published in good, reputable magazines. And I just wanted to get published, you know. So I started, it's not just the fact that poetry is different from, you know, say prose. When you start writing a novel, at least if I would start writing a novel, it would be different. I would be sitting every day. I would be working on the plot, the characters every day. And, you know, it would be very much, most of it would be premeditated. In fact, all of it would be premeditated. But with poetry, it's that, it's, for me, it's mostly spontaneous, you know. So whenever I start writing poetry, I just write it down. And over these years, when I was studying these 4 years in college, I was writing a lot of poetry. I was getting it published. And once I was done with my degree, once I graduated, it just became clear that, yes, I want to publish my book. You know, I have some time and I have so many poems. And, you know, I started sitting down every day. I started editing them. I started writing new poems. Birth of a Mural, the title poem, is actually one of the poems that I wrote towards the end. The first poem, I don't even remember which one was the first poem, because some of these poems, I included them from my late teens, early 20s too. I edited them, and then I was like, you know, I have to include them. So poetry is different. And, you know, when I started writing poetry, I think it was very much clear to me that I would one day publish a book.
It was destined, I think. And what a gorgeous book to have released. And I have a slight one. Did a particular poem, because you said just then beautifully that Birth of a Mural came quite late in the writing process, but was there any particular poem that inspired you to go, right, this is going to be a collection, this is going to work as a collection together?
Okay, let me just go through my poems.
Oh, yeah, even more slicing. It's a lovely
one. With a particular poem, I think it was just the fact that I had, or maybe I can't think of any. I had plenty of poems with me, and one day I just sat down and I thought, you know, because I'm really messy when it comes to organizing my files in my laptop. I'm so messy. Each poem had a different file, and it was all over the place in the computer. So one day I just decided that, you know, something happened to my laptop, and I was like, you know, I should save all my poems in one document, or otherwise I'm going to lose them. And when I created a document, I was like, okay, these are plenty of poems, and this is a book. So then I started arranging them, and, you know, that's a whole another process. But I wouldn't say, I think Things I'm in Love with This Moment that I wrote maybe 2 years ago or a year and a half ago is also a poem that inspired me to maybe, if we have to choose a poem, then that would be a poem.
What a wonderful way of doing it. Not only did you resolve a situation and use that as a great impetus to put it all together, but then for it to be inspired for someone with love, I think that is wonderful guidance to new writers. I think that should be shared widely. What a wonderful way to have put the collection together. Right, I would love to invite you to share some more pieces with us and some background info all about them.
All right. Now we're going to go for, so the book is divided into 4 sections, and each section is, you know, it has its own themes, maybe some similar themes. And so I'm going to read the 4th poem from the second section, and it's called Outro to Grief. Now, if I know you people would know that outro means the concluding part of a song or anything artistic. So outro means the concluding part of it. And outro to grief is, it's what it means. In this poem, I try to sort of believe, the speaker believes in this poem that grief is stemming from boredom, or boredom stems from grief. And in the beginning, it talks about different coping mechanisms. And then it also tends to convey how experiencing one emotion, constantly. For instance, if you experience grief constantly, you grow tired of it. It becomes longer than one's life. So in this poem, you'd see how I try to compare the longevity of an emotion with someone who has died. Outro to grief. Boredom is a legacy. You crave cigarettes. If not cigarettes, then a Siamese kitten. Blueberry, his malleable purse. If not a kitten, then your own life hung in the billows of lampshades. This jarring sorrow coiling around you like Madhubala's regal twirls in those 1,000 ceiling mirrors. The melody of moonlight. How boringly slow a funeral procession is. Intensive too, like the 7 minutes Nana Abu lived before dropping his arm on the spring mattress, a whispering thud evacuating the last drop of exultation. Amana, with her Tuscan sun beak, leaves the clay pot a quiver on the windowsill. There comes a time in the longest day you get bored of mourning, so you liberate yourself in a small room, puff a parliament, think of ways you could destroy the last horcrux that has kept the day alive, to hungrily let go of this humdrum.
Bouncing. Oh, go please, Hiba. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
So that was outro to grief. And, sometimes you just get tired of this emotion. And the next poem is Ode to a Nurse. Again, most of these poems I wrote in the COVID period. And if you were writers, you would know that a writer or a poet can never escape their society. It's very hard to escape your society. Some way, the events happening around you tend to bleed into your poems. So this is what it's about. I had to write a poem that, was in some way addressing COVID, and the best people that I thought, to talk about were the medical staff, the nurses, the caretakers who were risking their lives to be there to take care of the patients suffering from COVID or other, illnesses. And the particular nurse or caretaker who inspired me to write this poem was my nani's. Nani is my maternal grandma, my nani's caretaker. I was visiting Karachi and she was just sitting, and I just, I had this in the back of my head that yes, I have to write a tribute to the caretakers and the medical staff. But when I saw her, so she became a stimulus for this poem, a muse. And so some of the things that you would see in this poem, the quirks of the quirks and eccentricities attached to this particular character, the nurse, are actually these were the things that I was noticing in that nurse. And you would see that I have sort of like juxtaposed her professional duties with her personal desires to make her look like a very normal, ordinary human. What we forget is that when these people are risking their lives to take care of other people, we give them a very warrior-like, godly demeanor. But in truth, they're just humans like us who are doing the human stuff. And that is what needs to be, appreciated. But again, they know their power. So this poem is a light-hearted poem about nurses and what they do. And it's set in the city Karachi, because I was visiting Karachi, and Karachi is a very loud city. It's a very loud city, and you cannot ignore its existence. Even if you're inside your homes tend to isolate you from your environment, from the city, and you are private in your homes. But with Karachi, that's not like that. You would be hearing voices, sounds, traffic, and smells of vegetables and whatnot. And so you can never escape the city. All right. Ode to a Nurse. The pretty nurse taps her feet, nibbles the fuchsia color off her nails, rests all day in the plastic chair, cares for her patients' bodies till they bloom into sedimentary macrocosms. She interlocks her death-licking fingers, remembering the fragrance of shea butter she stole from a surgeon friend's purse. Her phone tings, she whispers texts to her lover, except the texts do not confess love in the Bollywood style. She reminds the time around her of the rhythm of unreleased pleasure squirting in her nerves. Between these lonesome intervals, Karachi whizzes through her reveries. Sometimes a train undergoes a lunar death. Onion peels chant a mystic spell in the far offing of ill-grown greenery. Husbands quarrel in tall buildings. Of course, her hindsight can never forget these distinct sound of husbands. She stares into the effervescent gloaming of her patient's eyes, knows which one needs to recite the kalma. Her mouth chews on cashews and peanuts like it's cud. How cunningly has she earned the title of a prophet, sensing the advent of Qiyamah when a patient gives up his snores. She knows that lungs hold more than a thread of breath, and death too demands careful nursing. So that was Ode to a Nurse.
Both pieces are so deeply powerful and emotive, and once again, the way that people are responding, feeling that, listening, gently putting hearts and applauses, just says it all. What would you say are some of the biggest themes of the collection?
All right. The biggest themes are, if I have to think from the top of my head, it's grief, but also anticipatory grief, like when you anticipate grief, and the concept of inner world versus outer world, the difference between, or just the comparison between inner world and outer worlds, women, and I would just like to say women. I wouldn't say the struggles of women or the women as, these empowered beings, rebellious women, just women in all their, shades. And of course, social and political commentary, aloneness and dissociation, and then finding hope is one of the themes too. So yeah.
They're exceedingly powerful themes. I think they speak to a lot of hearts. And attached to that, really, when collating pieces for the collection, how did you plan which works to use?
Okay, so of course I had written many poems, and because when you're writing for 5-6 years straight, you are left with a lot of unfinished and finished work, right? So it took a great amount of reading and editing to decide which poems are complete and which poems need, say, more attention. So the ones that needed more attention, or the ones that I thought were not complete, or the ones that I could not let go of, because you have to let go of your poems. You know, it's the poet has to abandon the poems. The poet has to let go of the poems in order to send them out to the world. So I didn't include them in this collection, and this collection has 60 poems divided into 4 sections, and the sections don't have a name, but they have similar themes. Okay, and the way I grouped these poems into sections in a poetry collection is there are different techniques that poets do that. Mainly to do it with themes. So if if there are poems about grief, you put them all together. If there are poems about motherhood, you put them all together. But sometimes it's also similar forms. I particularly used the free verse because that is what came to me more naturally. Now I'm experimenting with other forms, the Japanese Yuhitsu form. I'm writing sestinas, I'm writing ghazals in the English style. So I'm experimenting with all of that. But for this collection, it's almost all of it freestyle. So I did not have much option to group them uh, with respect to their forms. But then there's another way to divide your poems into different sections. Sometimes some poems would have same words. For instance, if I've used cats, references to cats or dogs, then I would group them together. If I've used the word mother in some way, I would group it together. So, or sometimes if they convey a similar emotion or they have a similar emotional impact, I would read them aloud and I would see. Obviously, I don't know what impact they would have upon readers, but to me, if they have the same emotional impact, I would group them together so that the writer, the reader, the is can read smoothly. Then they're in one rhythm, because if you jump from one theme to another frequently, then you just break the rhythm sometimes. That's what I would do. So that's how I did.
And I think fluidity is one thing that most of the audience, and from what I've seen of reviews and responses, has been something greatly celebrated about this collection. That sheer amount of work that you put in shows, because it is so fluid. You can open at any page or follow the chapters through and still get the same fluid experience. And talking about fluidity, I would love to hear some more work, and so would the audience. Please, could you share some more pieces?
Okay, all right. So we have done Ode to a Nurse, and now we'll move forward with Domesticated. Now this poem is very short, but where is it? It's short, that's why I can't. Okay, here it is. Domesticated, and it's a short abstract poem, which I think if you read it, it would make, and read it again and again, it would start making more sense. But I would still read it and see how the audience receives it. And of course, I will discuss that the themes are basically about the unacknowledged grief surrounding a miscarriage, right? And the speaker in this poem had recently experienced a miscarriage, and now so I wouldn't say the society that I come from, but my immediate environment and the people, like extended family, older people, friends. So I've just noticed that the topic or the grief surrounding miscarriage is not acknowledged mostly. People tend to just objectify women by saying stuff like, oh, she can try again, or they would start saying something about her incapability to produce a child. Even if they're not saying it directly, it's very much in the undertones there. So this poem tries to address from a woman's perspective how you can deal with grief and how much it matters to her, and how much the external influence, for instance, how much she has to tame and suppress these genuine emotions, say, to to adjust with the expectations or demands of the domestic life, domestic relationship. So this is domesticated. All picture frames have crevices the size of bloodworms. Every night his gaze imitates my straying gaze. I sketch Lycian visions on my stretch marks, a dream loop of arachnids going rampant in the arid deserts hemming my uterus. It's truly cumbersome to extract a revelation from a source of destruction. Feigned condolences, buzzkill, lilt of songs, lilt of memories, drip, dribble, drizzle, drip. His hands compressing my thighs, resuscitating an afterlife, his helplessness domesticating my cold, unruly grief. So, a very small poem that, captures the whole emotion of grief.
Very much so. And preparing readiness for our second, but I think it hits with it the way it's so short, it just strikes you immediately.
All right. Thank you. So I should move ahead with another one, or
Yes, please. Yes, please.
okay. Wait, let me see. I'm going to go ahead and read a poem from the fourth section. The fourth section of my book is mainly, social or political commentary. And this particular one is, it has some background that I would like to discuss. It's a very short poem, but I think the background and then the references I used, it's very important to understand them. And, for the readers who are like people who are not here, and if they would go ahead and read this poem, it would take them a while to understand this poem. And I have used some cultural references too, and I didn't explain them in the book because I feel like when we, as people who come from non-native, we are non-native English speakers. So when we read the Western literature, we actually have to dig into it ourselves and search the cultural meanings, the biblical references and everything, and that's what we studied in English literature. So this is what I try to do. This poem also serves the post-colonial narrative that, I'm going to write something and whoever wants to read it, they have to be able to understand the cultural references too. So they have to do their own research. But just to keep things smooth here, this poem is called Verbis Diablo, and Verbis Diablo is a phrase which means devil's words. It's a Latin phrase which means devil's words. And if you people have watched Penny Dreadful is one of my favorite seasons, TV shows. So they used this particular phrase to describe the devil's language. So to me, the reason why I call it that is that this poem actually explores how language can have a more sinister aspect to it and how it can, and its manipulation. Language, power, and cultural identity. There's a Marxist concept called conspicuous consumption, where usually you buy certain valuable, or you attach value to certain products, and then you buy them, incessantly to sort of, you use them as an accessory to show off that you're a superior elite person, and other people cannot afford these particular things, or other people are not really allowed to use them. So this is how you create a class difference, by accessorizing yourself with those products. So I have equated English in the same sense. In my culture, because this was a colonized land, and some people still have colonized mindsets, and they use English as an accessory, as a language that is a language of elite class of superiority. Sometimes we are fighting in our native language, and the other person would go ahead and start talking in English, like, to show that I'm this sophisticated, educated person, and I'm talking in a superior elite language. Means I won the argument. So these things are very much there in our culture. So this concept is being explored in this very short poem. And then I've talked about Hiba Khatun. Hiba Khatun is my muse. So she was a Kashmiri poet from, I think, 16th century Kashmiri poet. And I really like her story. One, because her name sounds a little similar to my name. And second is that I really liked her story surrounding the fact that, she was married off to someone else, and then she sought divorce. I'm talking about one side of the story because it's a very old, you know, it's like in the 16th century, so there can be many histories. We're not sure which one is correct, but the one that I read and I liked is that she sought divorce, and then she followed her heart and married this another person, and and then he was going somewhere, and she said, you're gonna get caught. She was very intuitive, and I really liked her strength and her intuition. And that's what happens. Her beloved, her husband, gets caught, and he never comes back. So she starts writing laments, and she starts writing poetry, and she starts singing her poetry. She's considered the woman who introduced lyrical poetry to this to Kashmir. And so the reason why I often invoke her in my poems is because if we have to call language pure, there are certain language purists here who would say English is the language. In our culture, Urdu is considered the pure. There are some Urdu purists who would say that Urdu is the pure language over Punjabi or say other languages. So if you have to call the language pure, call it because of its the cadence within it, the emotion within it, the purity that comes from expressing yourself. And another reference that I've used here is Baruch Landau. If you people have read Jane Austen books, you would know that Baruch Landau was this particular form of, again, conspicuous, referring back to the concept of conspicuous consumption. Baruch Landau was this horse carriage that only the elites of the society would use. And, if one just thinks of it and the way Jane Austen portrayed it too, it may have looked a lot like a normal horse cart or horse carriage, but maybe a little shinier because they kept it clean and whatnot. But they had to call it something very hard to pronounce and something very sophisticated to sort of give that sense of superiority, that this is Baruch Landau and this is something that only we can write, not you, mundane folks. Yeah. And then if you've read Milton, Paradise Lost, Mammon is a demon or a fallen angel that worships wealth and money. So it's a very short poem, but it had a lot of background to it. Verbis Diablo. Mammon now lurks in English dactyls, stressed syllables untethering the bonds of stout Punjabi ragas. The accentuated ers and oh my gods, and the most misconstrued like the invisible cries of Hiba Khatun, lost in translation, lost in the history of voice, when voice was not a political strum. She is a poet because she wiped her tears with the cadence of language. But here, at Maghrib, the muezzin gargles with Arabic verses. The English teacher at school, slick as a Baruch Landau, drunk with the scent of Marilyn Monroe, siphons Urdu from our dreams. True splendor is in performing wuzu with impurities usurping the throat. So this was a small poem about all the aspects that I talked about. And it's really how much of our native language, which for me is Urdu or Punjabi, is really ours, because English is used as the language of, say, educated people, is presumed as the language of educated people and the superior class. But on the other hand, Arabic is the language of our religion, right? And that has certain superiority attached to. So how much of our native language is actually ours is the question that I want to leave the readers with in this poem.
And I think it deeply resonates, especially because I think you're absolutely right about how there's an imperialism to just language by itself. And once again, just seeing people's responses, it just says everything about how much they really link and agree with you. And I don't think it's spoken about enough. I have, if you're okay with, a couple more questions for you.
All
So,
right. Go ahead.
please tell us about your road to getting published. You know, it's the big dream for so many. How did it happen?
Imagine Sisyphus and he's unable to move the boulder upwards, not because it's heavy, but because his hands are shaking with anxiety. So what I mean to say is that it's a slow and cumbersome process, and you get restless throughout the journey because you really, the moment you sign the deal with the publisher, and I'm really glad that I found a publisher like Alice who instantly read my work, and she wanted to publish the book. And she has been so supportive. Like, I feel like in this corporate world, publishing world, that, like in everything, publishing is also a corporate world. And you seldom come across people who are genuine, who genuinely believe in your art, who genuinely support you. And I'm glad that Alice, my publisher, is one of them. And even, after getting published, she, I started ghosting her and everyone for a month or two, because I don't know, for some reason, I wouldn't say I fell in depression, but I just felt empty. And then I connected with some poets and writers who had also published their debut books, or they had published their second book. And I asked them that, is it the same for other poets and writers too? Do you feel the same way when you publish your first book? Do you go through a dry spell, and do you feel empty? And they said it's very common for people to feel this way. It's okay, you will find your way back. And Alice was my biggest supporter there again. You, Daniel, Alice, all of you people, I really like that. And I remember how while I was caught up in the publishing process, we came up with verse murals, right? The Instagram live verse murals. And that was something really nice, a nice way to start promoting my book, a nice way to call other poets and give them a platform to read their poems. So I think the process was like, I felt very anxious because, like I said, the minute you sign the deal, you want to hold the book in your hands. So those many months, that's just a lot. But verse murals really helped me, and step by step going through the process, like editing, proofreading, finding the right cover with Alice, going for the right title, all of it helped me, like helped the time, actually helped the time, not me. It helped the time to pass by. So yeah, that's the whole process about.
Beautifully answered. And you've mentioned some already, but who is your biggest poetic influence?
There are many. I wouldn't say that there is one. I would list them. I wouldn't really discuss each one of them, because then that can be like a whole new, that would take a lot of time. So Maya Angelou, even though she may not be my that much, she's also my poetic influence, but I really like her autobiographies and the way she writes them. And I feel like if I ever start writing prose, I do write short stories and they have been published as well. But if I ever want to write a novel length prose, it would be an autobiographical work now. Maybe not crime novel, because that phase has passed, and that has evolved into poetry itself. So because I really like the way she talks, she tells her story. It's very different. So of course her, and then because we have studied English literature, so the Romantics, excuse me.
No worries at all.
Yeah. So it's the Romantics, Edgar Allan Poe. I love the element of suspense and the surreptitious tone in his works. Anne Sexton, Edna St. Vincent Millay, Sylvia Plath. Not really Plath's works, like not really what she says, because what she says in her poems can be really triggering. But the way she says it. So I like Plath and also this contemporary Welsh Indian poet Tishani Doshi, because I really like that they use certain jargon related to biology and medicine as similes or metaphors in their poems. And I really like that. So I think I try to do that somewhere in my poems too. And recently I've started reading T.S. Eliot again. Up till last year or so, I was calling him a pretentious dweeb, but, but I started reading him and I really started liking him a lot. From here, from my country, Parveen Shakir, Ismat Chugtai, all the progressive writers of Pakistan, the Pakistani progressive writer movement, Hala Alian, the Palestinian-American poet, Zana Hashim Bek, the Lebanese poet, Joy Harjo, Ada Limon, who is currently the poet laureate of America, Mary Oliver, and Rilke, and there are just so many. So, yeah.
Well, I feel like I can feel those influences across a lot of the work, and being so widely read is what comes off beautifully from that. What a treasure of knowledge that you have, Hiba, honestly. Right, I hope everyone's been paying very close attention, because we are moving on to the quiz portion of our webinar. So let me give a little bit of detail of what we need to bear in mind. So get ready. There'll be 2 winners to get a free book and ebook, as mentioned. I'm going to be sharing the screen with the document with the questions of the quiz and ask people to comment the answers in the box. And we will be checking for the correct answers and then be announcing a bit later. So just bear with me 2 seconds while I do the technical parts there. And I hope you're excited to join on in. Right, let me make sure everyone can see this. Everyone able to see? Please give me a thumbs up quickly for whoever would like to, just to make sure that you can see the thing. And
yeah.
Hiba,
Can you all see the screen?
Yeah.
You have to answer this quiz, especially people who do not have my book, and the people who answer from Pakistan, the first winner from Pakistan will get a signed copy of the paperback version of my book, and the first winner who is outside Pakistan will get a free ebook.
So make sure to be putting your answers in the chat, because Hiba and I will be watching out, and I'll be reading them out just in case you can't see very clearly. So if everyone's ready to give it a go, here's our quiz. So, number 1, in the poem Birth of a Muriel, what does the mother teach her baby? I'll repeat that question again. In the poem Birth of a Muriel, what does the mother teach her baby? Is it A, the concept of repetition, B, the sounds of animals, C, the names of family members, or D, the colours of a rainbow? And I'll do those answers again. Is it A, the concept of repetition, B, the sounds of animals, C, the names of family members? Where we've got answers coming in already. Or D, the colours of a rainbow? I will do all the questions again before we bring it to an end, by the way, so just in case you missed anything. So, number 2, in Ode to a Nurse, what does the nurse remember stealing? A, her lover's purse. B, money from a surgeon friend's purse. C, shea butter. Or D, a patient's belongings? I'll do number 2 again then. In Ode to a Nurse, what does the nurse remember stealing? A, her lover's purse. B, money from a surgeon friend's purse. C, shea butter. D, a patient's belongings. And for number 3, what is the size of the crevices mentioned in the poem Domesticated? All pictures are framed for the crevices the size of, and we'll need you to put a number in there for us. So, what is the size of the crevices mentioned in the poem Domesticated? All frames were crevices the size of. Now, if you're happy, I'm going to repeat all those questions again and all the options again.
You
Please
have
let
to
me know.
write your answers in the comments.
Yeah, please write your answer in the comments so we can see and mark up. For everyone who'd like to get a wonderful chance to get
Felix,
signed copy.
why are you participating?
Okay. Right. Also, can everyone hear me clearly? I'll just go through all of those again. So, question number 1. In the poem Birth of a Mural, what does the mother teach her baby? A, the concept of repetition. B, the sounds of animals. C, the names of family members. D, the colours of a rainbow. Number 2, in Ode to a Nurse, what does the nurse remember stealing? A, her lover's purse. B, money from a surgeon's friend's purse. C, shea butter. D, a patient's belongings. And 3, what is the size of the crevices mentioned in the poem Domesticated? All I picture frames have crevices the size of, and we're going to need you to pop a number in that. Right. If you're happy, Hiba, I'm going to stop sharing screen. Let's see how people are getting on.
Okay, all right.
Oh, thank you very much, Elise. Well done, people. We'll give you more time to think. I'm seeing some correct answers, which is always a good sign. So give you a little bit longer to think about everything. And let me know if you need me to repeat anything. Okay, keep on keeping on. Right. Ooh. Don't know if we've got anyone who's got all of them right just yet, but we'll keep on going. Doing very, very well. And just remember, to win is a signed copy of this book if you live in Pakistan. And if you live outside of Pakistan, you'll be getting an e-book copy. Just checking on answers on here. We have at least one possible winner, which is good to see. Anyone else who'd like to throw in, please do. You still got a little bit of time. We definitely have at least one winner. Right. Has everyone had a chance to put their answers in? And finally, does anyone want me to read out the options again?
Yeah. Who are there?
Yeah. Because I'm just getting ready to at least announce one of our winners. But I just want to give a chance to make sure everyone's had a chance. Okay. So, if you're happy for me to continue on. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me clearly there? Can everyone hear me clearly? Oh, thank you. I've just seen some last minute answers. Thank you. Right. Any final, because I'm still seeing some responses coming through on the chat.
You can share the document again.
Yeah, let me reshare for a minute just so everyone can see it. So my computer unfreezes.
We do see correct answers.
Yeah. Just going to quickly reshare so everyone can see the answers again. Right. Any more people wanting to quickly put their answers in before we call for our winner? Any more for any answers?
If two of them are from the same country, then the first winner can get the signed book. The other one
Just had
yeah.
Bashir join us. Okay, then I'll call it for now and announce at least our winner. So if I just stop share just there for a minute. So a very large congratulations to Maria. Congratulations, you stormed on in there with every single answer correct. Maria, could you please pop us your email address or whatever details you'd like to send us so we can formalize the address to send you the book? And also a big I'm so glad you did fantastically. And for the ebook, it's Felix, a very dear friend of ours. Congratulations on your second way around, you got it. So well done. So thank you for your efforts with the poetry, and actually particularly thank you very much for listening so carefully there to pull out the answers so effectively. It was really wonderful seeing you all play with our quiz. You were very focused, Maria. It was wonderful, actually. And said you just flew on in there with all the answers. Thank you. So we are now going to open up for some questions. Please pop any questions you would like to ask straight into the chat box for us. And Hiba is going to have a look at different bits and pieces in between, and we'll prepare for some questions. And also, Maria, please make sure you give us your contact details so we can send you over the information. Felix, I'm pretty sure I know how to do that with you anyway, but I will double check how you prefer that to happen.
I can send it to Maria too because she's a friend.
Oh, fantastic. Even better. Right, yes, so questions, audience. Is there anything you've been wanting to ask Hiba, especially with the wealth of her knowledge? I'd pick her brain as much as possible. Feel free to pop them in the chat box for us. Oh,
yeah. If you have any questions, you can ask me and write them in the chat box and I'll answer them.
Got just an old friend joining us as well, which is lovely. Right in time. Yeah, just any questions about the book, about Hiba's writing journey. Also, hello, Kiona.
Hi, Kiona.
Thank you, Maria. That's so lovely of you. Yeah, Maria, particularly as one of our two winners, any questions you've been wanting to ask? Felix, anybody who would like to, feel free to pop a question in the chat box.
Nobody has any questions. I guess covered all.
You've answered so beautifully, so all the questions. Oh, here we go. What was your biggest inspiration for verse murals? Oh, hello.
Verse, do you mean the open mic that we used to have, or does he mean book? I think it's the book, right? Or maybe the open mic. So I can talk about both. Both, all right, both. So, biggest inspiration for the open mic that I conduct on my Instagram account with Genevieve, who's my co-host, um, is, I guess, we were having a conversation and Jen, in fact, asked, she said, now that you're, you have started your journey, publishing journey has started. So why not start promoting your book? We should do something. We should. So then that's when we came up with verse murals, and we were like, we should do an Instagram open mic. We went for a pilot um, Instagram live, and it went really well. And then we started doing it. I remember all the summers of 2022. It was Jen asking me if I'm free on Saturday, or me asking Jen if I'm free on Saturday, and then we would schedule verse murals, and it went really well. So I would say um, the conversation that Jen and I had became the stimulus for that um, Instagram open mic live. And as for who the inspiration for my book, I have told this earlier too, that once I started writing poetry, it was very clear to me that I had to get it published. And Birth of a Mural is a title that I think um, so Maria, Dr. Maria is a really nice friend of mine. I call her Maria now because, she doesn't teach me anymore, but and she has become a really great friend. But I think she's one of my inspirations and my muses because she always supported me, and she always um, told me that, you write really good uh, poetry and you have to, when I started compiling it, she was reading it all along, and I asked her for feedback, and she would just say, I don't think you need any feedback because your poems are, really good and they're very refined. And then I would say, okay. So, you find muses in different people, different friends who support you and inspire you to write poetry. Next question is, synthesize so many styles? That's a nice question.
Hmm.
So naturally, once you read a lot of poetry, the best way to know styles and to be able to synthesize them in your work is to read a lot. And because I am a bilingual poet per se, because I know the Urdu conventions in poetry too. Now I've started reading more Urdu poetry as well, and then combining that with English poetry, conventions. I would say the style comes naturally. Whatever I read, and these two cultures within me, my culture being the dominant one because I live here, they translate in my works. And the styles are sometimes when you start writing, you tend to imitate styles of different poets. And I would imitate the romantics in the beginning, blank verse. But now I go for freestyle poetry. Not go for, like in these particular poems, it's free verse. The thing about free verse is that uh, you are free to write whatever you want to. You're free to create musicality, and you are not really restricted within one verse, like a meter of a verse. You can go for enjambment. Enjambment means when the thought or the rhythm lingers on to the next verse. And with free verse, what you can do is the style or the form that you choose is, it's always a mystery because it's up to you when you break the line, and how, it can be a mystery for readers to then, when they start reading the work of a poet and they see that a particular poet has created a line break at a certain instance within a poem, they would question that why this particular line break happened here, why this particular word stayed in that in the previous verse, and why did the poet start? So there are many reasons for that. So I am going for more contemporary styles now. There's a Japanese Yuhitsu style that I'm experimenting with. It's a bit like epistolary style of writing, but a more contemporary and casual version of that, poetic version of that. And then I'm also experimenting with ghazal, the English style, but I'm also bringing our Urdu format of ghazal very much in there. So yeah, all these styles you explore, I do tend to somehow synthesize them in my poetry. Do you feel theoretical? That's a very nice question. That as a poet, do you feel theoretical knowledge serves as an asset or something that curtains your creativity? Like I said, that poetry has to do with, yeah, poetry has to do with sound, right? It's musicality, and the sound of a text is what makes it a poem. There are certain magazines, and sometimes, there are. I recently sent my poems to this very highly reputable magazine. I don't know whether I will get accepted or rejected. That's another story. But they had specifically said that we do not need intellectual philosophical work of poems. We need casual poems, your emotions, everything, casual and fun. And we need sonic poems, sonical aspect of a poem. So I would say that poetry is more about the sound and the rhythm and the imagination. Of course, you need language and maybe smart language to be able to form, to be able to come up with certain images, certain imagery, certain sensory imagery in your poems. But I wouldn't say that it is you have to be very intellectual or very knowledgeable in your field to be able to write poems. Of course, you can learn, as long as you're learning the craft and you're evolving as a poet, that's good. But I don't think that should be a condition. If you want to write poetry, just write poetry. Don't wait that, if I'm going to read all these anthologies of poetries, or, if the Norton anthology of poetry, then I'm going to be able to talk about poetry or write poetry. No. Just see how you can translate music into words, into poetry. That's what I say. At what stage of writing poetry did you feel that you as a poet developed a unique, distinctive style of your own? That's a very nice question. Imitation is always there in the beginning, because when poets are not only in love with the words, they're also in love with the person who's writing. Like, poets are very much in love with the poet. So it's very common to start by imitating the works, but you have to find your original voice. So what I do is, and this is something that most poets practice too, that when they are writing poetry, they would start reading prose novels. And when they are writing prose, they would start reading poetry. So there's a contrast there. So whatever you're writing, it does not subconsciously just you start imitating them or their images. It's very hard. Sometimes you do not deliberately plagiarize a work, but you have read it so often that you think that you're not familiar with it, but somehow it is the work of another writer. So how did I find my own unique, distinctive style? I think towards in these 2-3 years in the COVID period, I sat down and I started writing poetry, not just a spontaneous poetry, but some of it was premeditated. And I looked at my style and I read contemporary magazines and journals and contemporary writers, and I saw that, you know, they all have their own unique style. You cannot really confine them to a particular you know, manner of writing, and there are so many techniques being followed. So I think attending different workshops and writing poetry every day, and you know, or like for most, like not like once a month, but maybe twice or thrice a week, that helps you develop your own voice. Practicing is the only way. And for some time, just distancing yourself from the people, the poets you love, and just finding your own truth. Sometimes what I do is that if I'm struggling to write a poem, I would simply write it in Urdu, because these days I'm also exploring Urdu poetry. I would say forget English and forget the impact English has on me. I would think of something in my own native language, whatever I want to think of. And then it comes out as something very different. And then when I translate it to English, sometimes that's a very nice way of writing poetry for me. I write something in my native language, and then that's a whole new fun side to it that I translated, and I see how much of it is translated. The meaning is translated to English. So through these experiments and through attending different workshops and through reading my own, you know, poets from my, you know, culture, my history, that has helped me develop my own voice. And I think I'm still there. The journey is still there. You know, it's going on.
Thank you so much for making us part of your journey, as well as your readers and your fans and your friends. And actually, what a brilliant question to kind of bring us to our conclusion. Thank you all so much for coming and attending. A big, silent, if you don't mind, applause to Hiba as a fantastic poet who has been so inspirational to listen to. And congratulations. Yep, absolutely. Quietly pop those claps up as much as you like, or your hands up, or your little hearts, because she's been absolutely terrific throughout this entire webinar and so fascinating to listen to. And I'd like to open also, Hiba, to anyone you'd like to thank yourself at this particular moment.
Of course, I would like to thank everyone who attended the session and participated actively. That was very kind of you people to come here and hear me read my poetry and ask questions and be curious about my work. Thank you, Genevieve, for being a brilliant host and moderator. You did an excellent job. And I know that you were hosting 2 events today, mine and some other, was it Terry? And
so carry on.
all right. So, you know, that's a very nice thing that, you know, I'm happy that you volunteered to host the session, and thank you for reviewing my book as well on your and publishing it on your website, Raylit Reviews. If you people don't know, Genevieve has her own website, Raylit Reviews, where she posts reviews of different books. So if you are an author, if someone is an author here and they want Genevieve to write a review for them, she will be happy to do that. I thank all my friends, Daniel, who you know, said so many great things about my book, and his observations regarding my craft and me as a poet, that those were, you know, very, I really liked them, very specific and very thoughtful. Yeah.
And a massive congratulations again to Maria and Felix. We will be in contact to get your copies over to you. Thank you all for being an amazing, wonderful, warm audience. Please, if you haven't had your chance yet, I've just put it up again with all of Hiba's handles. Get your copy, because this is truly a tremendous book. by an artist who is only rising and rising and rising. You want to be in and get in these early days, watching her explode into the universe. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you, Hiba. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you. Thank you, and good evening, good afternoon, and for those particularly, good morning and good night. Thank you very much.